Okay, so some of you may or may not know that earlier today, the Reform Party, formerly the Brexit Party, owned and operated as a sort of business entity by Nigel Farage, streamed an announcement, and we're going to watch it. The spoiler is that Nigel Farage has announced that he is going to be running as a candidate in the next in the general election in a few weeks' time. But let's see how this announcement went down. Interesting having the press on the stage. That's certainly an interesting approach to running the day. Oh, sorry, I'm really enjoying having the small talk of the press mic'd up. Sorry. He was like, "Oh, you in Bristol now? Are you? Yeah, I'm in Bristol." Just that sort of like professional colleagues who only see each other every so often. Richard Tice.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen.
Oh no, it's not. It's a man who sort of looks like Richard Tice presumably looked about 10 years ago. He's going to be introduced by himself a tiny bit younger. Oh yeah, so just to clarify, they called this press conference this morning, I think, for 5 p.m. today. I think we were discussing this on a stream recently, the colour of the ties. Mint ice cream, this sort of colour they've got going on here, it looks like a wedding tie. Not one that personally I would choose. I don't want to completely disparage it in case one of you had or would like to have this particular shade of tie at a formal occasion.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the leader of Reform UK, Richard Tice.
That's a good announcement, boys. Oh, that wasn't a big round of applause, was it? Wasn't particularly convincing.
What's happening to the polls? Are we going down? Are we holding? No. We're going up. Yes.
It is the kind of energy of maybe like a children's entertainer, maybe a sort of head teacher, actually. A head teacher doing an assembly about an election.
That's why when the news came out about Facebook, without spending anything on Facebook advertising, we're getting the most likes, the most shares, because we're talking about what people want to talk about.
I don't think it's any surprise that Reform might manage to hold Facebook south. I think if there's any social media platform that the Reform Party is likely to win, it is Facebook.
The huge unplanned increase in the population is putting massive pressure on housing, on rents, on the affordability of accommodation, and at least we're prepared to talk about it.
What this country needs is for more people to be talking about immigration. That is definitely true. If there's one thing that doesn't take up enough of our political debate, it's immigration.
We can go from 5th gear through to 6th gear. This is a fossil-fueled car, by the way. To 7th gear, but what about 8th?
Oh, if only, I feel like every time we watch any of this kind of right-wing sort of boomer-targeted stuff, it's always the little asides, the very much sort of Alan Partridge-esque. Yeah, this one's just raw diesel. Greta Thunberg would hate it.
So the big question is, does Nigel want to stand?
So I'm just the fact that it's all so sicko, it's so based around him, like Nigel Farage is sort of the politician they have. At this moment in time, I think this is about to change, but at this moment in time, as he's delivering these words, Richard Tice is the leader of this political party, and he's like, yeah, I'm the leader of this party, and do you know who everyone's talking about? The other guy. The one you've heard of. That must be a bit depressing. There's an extent to which that's the same for the Green Party. Caroline Lucas is the Green Party politician that most people in the UK are likely to have heard of. But it would be a bit depressing if Molly Scott Cato or any other Green Party member had to be like, and do you know what we're here to talk about today? Caroline Lucas. I do also like the fact that the Reform Party has to stream from Nigel Farage's personal YouTube account. Is that just, I can't say I've ever searched YouTube for the Reform Party YouTube account. Here we go. Reform TV. But it just has... They just seem to have given up on it, maybe. Oh, no. Oh, okay, sorry. We need to appreciate the fact that... So, the thing we're watching is Nigel Farage about to announce that he is coming back and becoming the leader of the Reform Party. That happened today. 2 days ago. 2 days? So what? 48 hours ago, the Reform Party's official YouTube account uploaded a video called Reform UK, a bold party with bold leadership, all about how Richard Tice is really cool.
Well, here we are. We're about to have our evening event in Old Leek, right in the centre of Boston and Skegness.
Like, this is clearly meant to hype up Richard Tice. Love that. I love that they've created this whole advert to really like pump up and introduce the world to Richard Tice. And then 2 days later, he's like resigned for Nigel Farage.
Boost to Reform UK. I thought, well, actually, what I'd really like is to invite Nigel to be leader of Reform UK. And to my absolute delight, he accepted.
Just to clarify, that didn't happen. Nigel Farage said, I want to be leader again. And Richard Tice said, oh, okay, yes, sir. Also, complete lack of like people going... They totally expected everyone to go like, oh my goodness, what? He's back? Woo! And that just did not happen there.
He accepted. And so that's what the plan is. And that's why I'm delighted to welcome my very good friend, Nigel, to the stage to take us forward from here.
I mean, I assume this is largely a room full of press rather than supporters. But I feel like that's why you get supporters in, right? So that there's people there to go like, woo, yeah. Not just announcing the return of Nigel Farage and it just being like... So Crispin Fry is saying the guy with the majority shares in our party company. It's worth saying that most political parties, we've discussed this on stream before, so I won't talk about it for ages, but most political parties in the UK are constituted as some kind of like organisations or community organisations or membership organisation. And that means they have to have all kinds of like rules about how leaders of the parties get chosen. And those rules change all the time. They get changed in factional ways. They get changed in good ways, in bad ways. But Reform UK isn't constituted as a sort of community organisation or anything. It's constituted as just a limited company in which... Nigel Farage owns like the most shares, and that means that essentially he gets to decide when and if he gets to be leader, or if someone else wants to be. This is completely unlike the changing of the guard in any other political party, where usually there'd be, you know, something like a leadership election. With Reform UK, they just sort of decide who the leader's going to be.
Richard,
Just Richard Tice having to just like walk off the stage there and just be like, "That's me then, I guess. I got to sort of be the stand-in for a while. I'll just be over here." What a complete like horrible exit from politics.
Richard, thank you very much indeed. Now, we put out the operations notice for...
That's like the saddest thing. Oh, like I don't want to feel sorry for him, but like it's a real, just like, just guess I'll just get off the stage then.
Under the title Emergency Election Announcement. And we did that because we think this election needs a bit of gingering up. Thus far, it is the dullest, most boring election campaign.
Gingering up. I don't know exactly what that sounds like, but it sounds unwanted and unconsensual. Never use the verb to ginger up. It will be interesting. Like, the assumption is that the Reform Party will eat up a bunch of Tory votes, which, you know, I think they are very likely to do so. The interesting thing will be, do they also manage to eat into some Labour votes? So one of the reasons that David Cameron called the EU referendum was because UKIP at that point were eating into the Conservatives' vote, but there was a considerable trend in which in certain regions former Labour voters were also leaking to UKIP as well. So it'll be interesting where they angle their messaging for this election, and whether they try and eat into some of that Labour vote, whether they just focus on drawing in Tory vote. Be interesting to see. Be interesting to see whether Nigel Farage wins his seat, because the one thing that he's really, really good at, Nigel Farage, is he's not necessarily good at becoming a member of Parliament, but he's very good at nevertheless managing to set the tone of debate and to kind of get what he wants anyway, regardless of whether he's actually in Parliament or not. UKIP are likely running candidates in the general election, but they have very much shrunk in stature, I guess. Sort of UKIP became the Nigel Farage party, and then Nigel Farage set up a new party. Wow, this is old school. This kind of animated logo up here. There we go. I didn't even know who the leader of UKIP was. Apparently it's Lois Perry.
We also know that our people are getting poorer. Yes, we had growth in the economy. The last set of figures were slightly better than before. GDP, they call it. We must all bow down to the god of GDP.
Is he going to be a degrowther? Is Nigel Farage about to come out as a degrowther? So by a degrowther, I mean there are certain people, usually from a ecological standpoint, sort of climate emergency standpoint, will argue that we need to turn away from this kind of fetishization in economics and politics with economic growth, which I think, regardless of whether you think that is necessary or positive, I do think we tend to labour under the assumption in political debates that economic growth means that people's standards of living are going up, people's happiness is going up, all of these other things that we want to be better and more are going up. Whereas in actual fact, economic growth or GDP per capita doesn't necessarily mean that that growth is being spread around. Governments, political parties will celebrate the fact that economic growth is higher than it was last year or whatever. But if all of that extra money in the economy is going to bosses, to the rich, to landlords, whatever, then it's not actually having the kind of broad positive consequences for people than it's kind of like assumed to mean that it is. So whether or not we think it's 100% necessary to move towards a system of degrowth, I think definitely unlinking our notion of things being good from economic growth is a necessity and a positive thing.
I stood here a week ago and I said, look, hands up. I've been nonplussed by Rishi calling a short-term election. Doesn't give me the time to fight a constituency. Doesn't give me the time.
Oh yeah, so just to clarify for anyone who's not been following this particularly closely, Nigel Farage had specifically said a little while ago, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, he was like, I'm not going to run. I'm not running. Like, I'm not going to do it. I think he said that he wanted to focus on the US election and supporting Trump. Oh, that's an interesting read from Minty Ben in the chat. So Minty Ben saying literally as soon as Trump got convicted and he realised there's no money to be earned there, he came crawling back. Although I wonder whether Trump being convicted was probably a good fundraising opportunity for Trump. Like, he can probably swing that, right?
And I guess I have been a champion for many of those people. I took the day off yesterday.
I guess some people could call me an icon. I don't know, like whatever. It's like so humble bragging.
Had a normal day. Walked the dogs, did a bit of fishing, popped into the pub, you know, a normal sort of day, which gave me time to think and reflect. And I began to feel a terrible sense of guilt.
Hard. Some trap shooting.
Even if it is very difficult for me to find a parliamentary constituency, and it is hard. I'll be launching my candidacy at midday tomorrow in the Essex seaside town of Clacton. So midday tomorrow, Clacton, at the end of the pier.
Wait, sorry. So they do have activists there to do the clapping and the whooping and stuff. But just Richard Tice could not win the crowd over. Richard Tice could not win the invited crowd to a press conference over. Pretends name saying he's trying to get to leader of the Conservatives. Maybe? Or maybe he does manage to supplant them, right? By sort of coming up on their right. Although certainly having the machinery of the Conservative Party would help. There's certainly a benefit and advantage to taking over the machinery of a political party that exists and has existed for a long time, and therefore has all the kind of infrastructure there to run an election campaign. There are benefits to that rather than being this kind of insurgent party.
That in 2015, against all predictions, we took more votes from the Labour Party than we took from the Conservative Party. So Keir Starmer, yes, he'll win, but we're absolutely going to make sure his percentage is a lot smaller than it is now.
I don't know whether they'll be able to do that in any like massively meaningful way. The big thing will be whether Keir Starmer will chase those votes, and he clearly is trying to. I think it's fair to say that the Labour Party is currently chasing Reform Party votes, which they'll say is the sort of, sensible thing to do, the thing that they should be trying to do, win every vote. But they're trying to chase those votes through doing the things that Reform Party voters would like them to, rather than through convincing those voters to come on side. Yeah, the Thinking Sabercat reminding us that Nigel Farage has tried to run for MP a whole bunch of times and never managed to win a seat. The one thing to say is that regardless of that, he has been very successful at shaping. He's probably the politician who's got the most things that he wanted over time. And the other thing is that it does seem like they might try and push for electoral reform, which would be interesting to have a right-wing party pushing for electoral reform, because we just tend to assume that comes from the left usually. Well, so he's back and he's running in Clacton. Who's campaigned there during previous elections? Yes, of course. So Douglas Carswell defected, was a Conservative MP who defected to UKIP and then won the seat in Clacton as the only person, I'm fairly sure, who's ever won a UKIP seat, maybe?